Hi, everyone. Welcome to 21st Century Saints, our podcast and live stream series for members and those affiliated with, adjacent to, or are just kind of interested in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in the United Kingdom and around the world. I'm your host, Jane Christie. I'm going to shout out to Sara Elizabeth Delaney. Queen Sara, do you want to say hey?
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Good to be with you all again.
And we have our latest co-host on the block, Ruth. Do you want to say hey?
Hello.
We had so much good feedback from last week's conversation with Ruth. Everybody has loved it, and so we're just so happy that you're with us tonight, Ruth. I want to jump in with some announcements, which I have some things to say. Guys, you can jump in whenever you want to. First of all, the most important thing I want to say is thank you so much to those who have donated, especially those who've donated towards stamps for our project. Recently, we sent letters to 385 bishops. Well, I mean, it was just under. There were a few extra we'd sort of put in for people's attention. So. I think, have we got some TV on there somewhere? Hold on.
Thanks.
I think we're good. No, we're all good. We're all good. I'm just making sure it wasn't.
We're good. We're good to go.
It's okay. We're good. So we sent out all these letters to bishops, and the feedback has been incredible. We are so pleased that the letter has been received in the spirit that it has been sent, that we are sort of trying to help. And what we've done is we've contacted bishops to let them know that they ultimately, according to the church lawyers who gave testimony in the recent independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, that the responsibility, it's very clearly laid out in black and white, the responsibility for safeguarding an award is the bishop. So where the bishop to knowingly call someone who poses some kind of risk to children, that it's really important that he has that information, that it does come with legal penalties. So we wanted to inform our bishops about what that could look like. We also wanted, really, just equally, as well as providing them with this information about their obligations, was to let them know where they can receive support and advice to fulfill their roles as the people who direct safeguarding in the ward. So we've been in touch with so many people who are members of the church, who are leaders in the church, who are bishops, stake presidents, right across the board. It has been a really, really busy week for us, and we are delighted to be able to take the time to be able to offer advice and have a chat about things that are concerning you. Every single time someone contacts us, it is completely confidential. We do not speak about the questions that are being asked, or the situations that maybe you're looking for advice about. Sara is an incredible resource and has worked in this space for such an incredible amount of time, and has already provided information that we know are keeping people safe right now, where it wasn't even necessarily something that would have been on a bishop's radar. Certainly wouldn't have been on mine. And we've been working in this space for a wee while now. So we're delighted about that response. We're delighted about those who are supporting bishops and stake presidents, those who are counselling with them, their families, members of the ward who've just heard about what we're doing. So it's so great to see that for the first time, I would say the history of the restoration, that we see people who are members of the church, people who have moved away from the church, people who have never been in the church, who are all in complete agreement that this is important, that we can make changes, and that there are things that we can do if we work together to keep the church the safest place it can possibly be for our vulnerable. We've never seen anything like this before. The positivity with which this has been received is incredible. So thank you for just supporting and understanding what we're trying to do. Thank you for playing your part. Those who have donated to make sure that we can continue to do this work, it is so appreciated, guys. We really, really do. We put out a link just in the comments there. If you want to make a donation, you can find that on our website also, which is at 21stcenturysaints.org. You can donate to us. You can donate to us there or through our donor box link. Okay. So the other things, we've given you a little bit of an update about how the letters have been received. We also want you to like and subscribe to this page wherever you are listening to this broadcast, whether it's in podcast form or whether it's on YouTube, Facebook. The more you do that, the more this message gets to the people who need to hear it. So we really value you when you're able to do that for us. Thank you. A final thing that I wanted to say that had come up in conversations we've done our work this week is that we, in this space, work with other UK podcasters from time to time. Those other UK podcasters are our friends. Some of them are our families. We have absolute fondness for them, and it's really important that we make it super clear. We don't always agree with positions on things. We don't always necessarily find the same humor in things even, but they are our friends. And the conversations that we have been able to have supported members right across the whole spectrum of Mormonism throughout the world. I am so thankful for the rest of the gang that have been affectionately called the Brit Vengers. I feel like what we've been able to do is to demonstrate how to have tough conversations that if we could have early, if we could have on time when they were needed, people might never have left the church. People may have left the church and had less trauma as they went through that really traumatic process. And I am pretty confident as someone who the church matters to me. It matters to all of the people in this space, or we wouldn't be doing this job. But as someone who will go to state conference this weekend and will vote to sustain the prophet and all of the other leaders whose names are called from the stand, they have never, ever asked me to step back from people who are friends who have left the church, even when they are hurt or angry or completely disagree. Jesus never taught that. So I'm proud to stand with you guys. All of the 21st Century Saints are proud to stand with you guys. Every single one of the 21st Century Saints in this team have different relationships to the church, from being completely engaged to choosing that this is no longer the path with which they affiliate. We are here to bless the journeys of every single person that we come into contact with, and we claim that right. So I wanted to make that super clear, just because we've had some conversations this week from people who maybe just to be made a bit more clear too. And you can disagree with it. The space might not be right for you, and that's okay. But we're gonna stand here and we're gonna engage in this work while it's making a difference. Okay. We want to talk tonight about what would happen or what would it be like if your bishop was a woman, if your state president was a woman. This seems like possibly maybe a very anti-Mormon question, or certainly a question that makes people in church quite nervous. The whole women's ordination thing was a massive thing several years ago. Kate Kelly was excommunicated for some of the work that she was engaging with, where she was asking for women's ordination in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are going to maybe talk a little bit about that, but there's things that we want to pull out of this question. I love sitting with these questions. So, first of all, can we maybe talk for a second about our position? Let's go to you first, Sarah. Do you want women to be ordained in the church? Are you looking for women to hold the priesthood?
It's never been a thing for me. I actually want to see more equality between men and women in the church, and I want to see women in every council and every room in the church where decisions are being made. I want to see that because I believe women bring something unique to that space. I personally have never felt a need or a call for ordination. Ordination of women is not something that is kind of high up there on my agenda of things I'd like to see change in the church. Equality, yes. Ordination, no. I'm quite okay with women not being ordained. I'm not calling for ordination of women, but I do call for equality of women. And I think the two can be very, very different.
What about you, Ruth? You've stepped back from the church. What are your views on women's ordination?
I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, so ladies, love me anyway.
We love you, Ruth.
So I think to have a view that women need ordination would be to view that there is actual priesthood power, and I don't believe that anymore. So do I think that women could function and offer and work as the leaders of a congregation? Absolutely. Do they have something to offer? Absolutely. Do I think we limit ourselves and hamstring ourselves by only looking to a particular demographic of men? Because it's not just men, it's men that then fall into a social and economic slice of life as well. Yeah, I think we really do limit ourselves. And I think there's a lot that women can bring to the space, but I think we can also then extend that to, there's a lot that trans women could bring to the space. There's a lot that gay people could bring to the space. There's a lot that people who come from a different economic background, that come from a different educational background could bring to the space. We really funnel down through this thin, to this thin process, this point whereby we limit ourselves. And that then means the people that are then called into those servings view the world through a particular lens. So I think women is a whole different lens, but I think, wow, there's an absolute kaleidoscope of lenses that are available to us that we're not even giving ourselves an opportunity to look through, which would bring so much strength to a particular congregation. And if we think about the UK especially, and how very, very limited feet on the ground are now in the wards and stakes, gosh, we need that strength. So.
Absolutely. I especially love what you're saying, about the fact that we're not just limiting this to the possibilities of women, but, making sure that, trans women are women, that that's something that would be included. Gay men, all sorts of types of backgrounds. I'm actually very rarely asked for my opinion on something. I think, people sort of worry if I'm maybe would be putting myself out there and saying something that I might potentially regret. I don't know. But I don't generally get asked questions that would lead to, possibly me disagreeing with doctrine. I find strength and growth and excitement in the questions. So I have never really had a need to sort of express, yes, I would like to have priesthood or the opportunity, or no, that's not really for me right now. For a long time, I sort of was exactly where you are, Sarah. That's not my major concern right now. But I suppose if I'm being really honest, it's maybe I would really rejoice if women were able to hold priesthood authority. And I know there's been sort of talks around that. I don't know that necessarily I'm talking about priesthood. Maybe I'm talking about priestesshood. Maybe I'm talking about something else completely. I don't know.
So do you think,
the question's stimulating?
Do you think when you're talking about, do you think that the bishop is using their priesthood when they're serving in a pastoral capacity? Or do you think the pastoral capacity is universal and it's about being it's humanity and it's actually showing kindness and compassion? Because when I was an active member and I blessed my food, I was calling on the power of God to do that. If I prayed for my children, I was calling on the power of God to do that. And when I participated in temple ordinances, I was, accessing the power of God, which is the priesthood. So I don't think I actually needed to have hands laid on my head and be given the power of God or the priesthood to be able to do those things. And actually to be a human, to be kind and compassionate and thoughtful and generous with my time. Every single member does that, hopefully, anyway, you would hope, regardless of gender. So I don't think the bishop is actually exercising their priesthood power when they're doing that pastoral role. But what do you think?
I mean, I think there's space for it to be a lot of things, right? It's and this is why I love the question so much. What is the priesthood power? How is it functioning in all of these different situations? Does it work differently in marriage? Is there a shared element of that? I want to say no. But so many women are really empowered by that idea. So I want to leave space for all of those possibilities, because I think where priesthood authority and priesthood power and the calling of a bishop and a stake president, etc., it all looks the same. It looks like the one thing. I think when that's expanded, perhaps we could be led by someone who experiences or understands priesthood maybe in a slightly different way, so that it would be more sort of pastoral. I don't know. I do feel that not having hands laid on my head, and I do feel a bit of a loss. I feel a bit of a loss, maybe in the way that we could be overruled at any time. There's always someone else who has that authority over you, which is fine. But when that person's always male, I don't know. We know that if we talk to a Relief Society president, she's always going to be ultimately the decision maker is the bishop. That will never be a woman. And I guess I feel a sort of sense of loss of, we don't get to have these PPE type interviews to see how are we progressing in the priesthood. So I think we've got this big loss of how we're even taught to engage with it. You know, in Relief Society classes or Sunday school, when it comes round, Relief Society, when it comes round to the lesson that happens more or less once a year on the priesthood, everybody switches off. It's the man thing. That's what I feel a big loss about. It's like, what is it we can claim in this space? Because if we're being taught to be more autonomous in our religion, if we're being taught that church is at home, and well, then what am I able to do? What power can I call on? What power do I draw on? I don't know.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the fact that in church because we have the priesthood, the power and authority of the priesthood, and we have the hierarchical priesthood system within the patriarchal organisation, are we actually saying that things would look very different if we got the best person for the job, regardless of whether they held the priesthood or not?
Yeah,
I don't know. If we sort of thought, hey, do you know what? You're a gay man, but hey, we really need what you have to offer. We want you to lead us. We want you to be the person that can help support us develop the strengths, the skills that we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry to. I think we've just voted Jane in as bishop.
It's happened.
Okay. Right then. But I just wonder, if we kind of looked more at what do we want in a leader? Maybe that's a good starting point, isn't it? What do we actually want in whoever's going to lead our congregation? Do we want a leader for our congregation? Or do we want to take an egalitarian view of who's the best person for the job? Like, Ruth, you would be incredibly skilled at doing this. So can you take that on? Do we want that? Or do we want a strictly hierarchical, organised, performative? Because we have a performative culture at the moment. Do we want a more pastoral culture?
I mean, I think the move in councils, certainly over the past maybe 10 years, has moved to that type of approach. So if they're counselling together, who is the best person to approach this need, which I think is really, really good. Would it be okay if I just for a really quick second, just taking aside, because Lucy's asking about our fourth 21st century Saint Alana. Alana is doing fantastic. She is happy. She's delighted. She is living her very best life. She will be back at some point. It's maybe just to sort of keep you all in, to sort of bear it in mind. We've been talking a lot about safeguarding. Alana's a survivor, and some of this has been, stuff that she's had to take a little bit of a rest from. So while it's not necessarily all about that, it's just about Alana processing life, not being a member of the church and not having these conversations to sort of maybe hold, what is my life looking like right now? So yeah, she's coming back. She watches, she's joining in, she's participating. We send her all our love. I'm excited for her to come back on the show to be able to tell you just how well things are going for her, because it is really exciting. So yeah, right, let's get back to Sarah, you were going to make a point.
Right, just to read this a bit. Okay, somebody, fine girl, I think it was, in the chat had just said, sorry if this has already been said, but does Church of Christ and Community of Christ Church have a female apostle currently? Yes, they do. They have female apostles. They have a female member of the First Presidency. They have females on the presiding bishopric. Yes, they do, because they're not looking at gender when they go for a calling and a responsibility. They're looking at who has the giftedness, the talent, the ability to serve in that position.
And that's really quite exciting and opening up, isn't it? So thinking about it from a hi Victoria in Virginia, and thinking about it from a UK perspective, when we're really struggling for feet on the ground, and I don't see that issue going away anytime soon, wouldn't it be really exciting to be able to say, we've just immediately day one, if the callings were about your availability and your opportunity to serve rather than your gender, you would double the available people to serve in all sort of capacities, wouldn't you? But I also think, and again, this is coming from my place and where I'm currently sitting, I would completely tear up the blueprint of the church as it is at the moment, the structure and the auxiliaries, and there's so much stuff that I would just go, I want a blank piece of paper, and before I would want to say, yes, let's have women as bishop, I would want to question and feel confident that, do we need a bishop? Do we need a stake president? Do we need auxiliaries? What do people actually need? Where is the need? And then what does a Church of Christ look like that meets all of those needs?
So can we start with that? What is the church to us, and what do we in the church?
Let's make it broader also. What are women? What do people who are not men and not making the decisions in the church, what do we all need?
Yeah. So I think, and we talked about this before the chat, when we were chatting. For me, some of the most important conversations that happened at church, the times when I felt like I was receiving the most care and giving the most care, happened in the foyer, the corridor, or the car park, even the loo. They didn't happen in a formal classroom setting. They didn't happen in a bishopric office when I was putting on my best face. They happened where I could interact and be, properly be real with people.
Who tends to be out in the foyers?
Yeah, interesting. The broken, the poor of hearts.
Yes, actually, very often those that feel marginalised and those that feel marginalised, those that struggle to see, where do I fit in? Where's my place? Increasingly, people who are struggling with doubts, with questions, with testimony. Increasingly, it's like really difficult to be in lessons, and it's like, let's go. I really don't want to go into that lesson because I can't.
Is the lesson needing to happen, or do we actually need to have community and pastoral support?
And also what's really important to sort of remember, some of the people who are out in the foyer, this I would say, we've got the people who are not feeling for some reason that they can go in and participate or hear what's happening in the classes. But when we think about who tends to be out there, it tends to be the people who've got the babies, right? It tends to be someone with a pram, someone who's worried that there's going to be noise or distraction, someone who is, for reasons, cannot engage in that space and has to consider someone else. There is something beautiful that happens out there in the foyers. Tell me, what about then? I'd like to specifically ask then, what are women feeling in the church when it comes to having male authority, and isn't Relief Society answering that sort of, isn't that what Relief Society is for? You have a Relief Society president, right?
Sara, do you want to go?
It's the big sigh because we know it's not been fulfilling needs.
No, it doesn't meet needs, does it? And that, so one of the last times that I was Relief Society president, I remember, and I got in trouble because I did it on a fast Sunday, naughty me, but I decided that there was so much pain in the ward, so much, and I couldn't share each other's stories, but I was funneling it through, I was hearing it all. And I just decided, right, we're just gonna, as a presidency, we're gonna do a great big jug of hot chocolate, we're gonna get donuts, and Relief Society is just going to be, how you doing? And it's going to be a conversation while we just sit and have hot chocolate and something nice to eat. And that's what we did. And it was really, really empowering, because there was no agenda, there was no teaching, there was no one in charge. We were all free to actually sit and be with each other, and some sat in silence and got community from that, and some needed to unburden and tell us about their week and what was going on with them. That was all we needed.
And I think for so very often at church we separate community from spirituality, and so very often what we're looking for is a space of community.
Yeah.
Rather than spirituality, we're looking for community. And if we don't have community, it's actually very difficult for us as human beings to get on board with looking for spiritual things in our life if we don't feel we're part of a community. I was looking for a quote that I'm going to have to paraphrase by Richard Rohr, who actually happens to be one of my favourite writers of all time. And he gave a fantastic quote when he said that one of the really important things that happens and changes for us is when we are not led by an outer authority anymore, as in the church says, or it's a sin if you do, or the church told you have to do this. There's not an outer authority leading us. We're claiming our inner authority, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and we're going on our own inner authority for the things that we need and the things that bring us closer to the divine, whatever that looks like for each of us. And it will look very differently for every single one of us. For some of us, the divine is just what goes on in our head. For some of us, there's a divine being. But I think church changes when we actually start thinking about it's about our own inner authority, not an external authority, and about community, and those things together will bring us closer to finding a spiritual balance in our life with other people.
I love that.
And I think as well that we were kept so very busy, not doing anything terribly meaningful, but very, very, very busy, and that didn't allow for enough time for reflection. And I really like what you said, Sara, that until you feel safe somewhere, until you feel that community, how can you possibly take time to feel the spiritual things, and even if that's just within your own self, even if you don't attribute that to a higher authority. But how do you take that time for that inner reflection if you're just constantly at that point of just being very, very busy doing things? So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about just reclaiming personal authority, and as an organisation feeling confident enough to allow people to do that and not feel the need to control that process. Because if you're offering something useful, they'll stay.
Yeah. So I'm going to share Naylan McBain. Her book Women at Church was really groundbreaking at the time. she sort of talks about this sort of middle way where nothing would change about church doctrine, but within the current framework which we have, which is kind of what we were talking about, Sarah. She sort of, you can disagree or not with her views, but it's really interesting to me. She says we currently have one of the most progressive gender doctrines among any Western religion, an acknowledged female deity, a fortunate fall which lifts Eve from condemnation, a doctrine of love despite gender, and an endowment of divine power for women in the temple. And yet, even these revolutionary beliefs have not inoculated us from gender challenges in our culture. Universal priesthood ordination would not safeguard us as much more effectively, she believes, than the current doctrine already does. Now, I don't know how I feel about that. But what she does make clear, and I think this is what I experience probably most at church, is that many women find purpose in these doctrines and the roles they prescribe. And it's true, they do. I really don't. But the most common thing that we hear at church, I think, other than the few who are maybe sitting out in the foyer, or that we hear it sort of not so much in classes, a couple of brave souls do. But yeah, the teaching that they are daughters of God who loves them without their having to earn that love results in a strong sense of personal worth. Women in the church today can feel a tension between what they are being taught at church or how they are being engaged at church and what they feel is the actual true revelation of their potential and worth. And I guess that's maybe what I'm sort of talking about, that we've talked about this before. You know, Sarah, you have so much experience and so much knowledge, and they're not always, they're just not used within a ward church. In fact, sometimes your experience becomes a barrier that you're specifically not going to be able to ask to counsel or be called into a specific situation. So, you know, we're talking about safeguarding in general at the moment. Women safeguarding officers are the gold standard. That should be happening. You know, I certainly, if I was a bishop, I would be Sarah would be invaluable. I mean, that kind of resource and award. Women accountants, people in any other area of industry where we wouldn't have to put women before the title. It's something we have to do at church. And how often have we, as women who've had our own businesses or had, you know, or been employed, and feel that you can speak really confidently, you know what you're doing, you know what your job is, you're good at it, and you come to church and you feel maybe stupid is going too far. But I think it's not.
You put your brain in a box and leave it by the door, don't you, and pick it up on the way back?
I don't think it is. Yeah. I don't think it is. I don't think that is too far in many ways. I think in many ways we do feel stupid at church when we take ourselves. What happens is we take ourselves, but do we take all of me? Do we take all of us to church, or do we take a part of us and leave a part of us at home? Yeah. It's like, I think there's two issues. One is, I think, the relevance of the church in the news. They will want to be part of the church if the church is relevant to the important issues. I think that's really important. And the other is we've got to find a way, equality, not inclusion, actually move further down that road to true belonging. And we can use LGBT issues as a classic example. We talk about loving people who are gay. We talk about it's not a sin.
Sarah, we're losing you
include a space for everybody, gay or not. But actually, there is show up as gay.
Yeah. Sarah, we're losing your signal just slightly, so I might get you to just reiterate what you've just been saying, because there's so many good things in it.
But if you show up as gay...
Well, I tell you what we
I was do. Just saying, I think the importance of the church being relevant today matters if we want to keep people in the pews.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. What about the question that was posed in the comments? How do you think it would go down with men at church if women were called in to positions where they would have authority over them?
So I think that's an interesting one. And I think any man that felt uncomfortable with that needs to have a good, strong look at themselves, because that tells them that they didn't actually view women as equal in the first place. So it's all very well paying lip service to, well, we get the priesthood, but you're this and we're this. I mean, we're all loved equally by God. That's great. I hope you really feel that way. But how would you feel if, and when that feeling makes you kind of catch yourself and you've got to sit in that little bit of awkwardness, that's interesting concept, isn't it? I would hope most men in the UK have been in situations where they've had a woman in a position of authority in the workplace above them, or had a female in their family who they would consider to be an authority and they would listen to, because we have that's the sort of culture that they've probably come across in the UK. It might not be the same in other parts of the world, I don't know. But if they feel uncomfortable with that, have a good, long, strong look at yourself. And if a woman would feel uncomfortable with another woman being in charge of a man, they need to have a good, strong look at themselves, because that tells them they didn't actually believe what they claimed to believe, which was that men and women are equal.
But we kind of know already that although in sacrament, I think it's pretty standard, you're going to hear talks given by women, and I think they're more or less responded to across the board, positively. I don't sort of generally hear anything negative about the fact that a woman has spoken, which it isn't the same across the world, as you point out. What about the fact that we listen more when that person who's speaking has authority? So we know that when conference comes around and there's a women's session, that session is for the women. We know that when Mother's Day comes around, we're going to hear things that really are designed specifically with women in mind and specific roles as a woman. So women aren't speaking to the whole church. Although we get maybe a wee glimpse in a sacrament meeting if you could speak to a whole congregation, but it's certainly not the same dynamic.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I personally would tear up the whole blueprint for it and just want to start afresh and go back to, okay, I love that, Doug. I love that you've had that experience, because it's an eye-opener, isn't it? And then when you reflect on the church, it's so very different. And the particular women that are in positions of authority, high authority in the church, and have a voice and have a sort of an opportunity to speak, are a very particular type, come from a particular family, speak with a particular voice. Not me, definitely not me. And that's, we get used to seeing that, don't we? But yeah, I think from a blueprint point of view, I would want to go right back to, what did Jesus do? What were his actions? What would an organization look like that emulated his actions? Because I don't think we'd be having big conferences to navel gaze and talk about being Christian. We'd be out there being Christian, and I almost swore then, but we would be out there helping people. We wouldn't be taking money from those people. We'd be saying to them, we've got all of this money we're sat on. What could we do? Let's have some women's refuge. Let's have some homeless shelters. Let's have some soup kitchens. Let's put mental health services into areas where there isn't a resource there. Let's actually throw all of the strengths and resources that we have at the world and make this world a better place. That would be Christian. We don't need to navel gaze. We don't need to have talks about it. We go out and we rescue the poor and the meek and all the rest of it. We actually do doing. Let's be Christians.
Area presidency, would you do me a huge favour and tell me where I'm allowed to talk about respond to, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
Ruth's
Sarah,
point
Presidency,
is
come on.
golden. Will you please tell me when I can speak publicly about it, because we are waiting,
Yeah.
because it's really bloody good. So please.
Yeah. You're queen of the world, Jane, because if that's the news, hooray, hallelujah.
Well, there is just a brilliant idea coming, but like everything that happens in this church, the idea is stuck on somebody's desk in an office somewhere, not being translated into practice. Get the idea of community and work and Mormon church out to somebody's desk and get it into practice. Let's get the idea announced.
And I say that as someone who, I am not kidding, I practice patience in my life. Oh my goodness, do I? This is not a matter of impatience. This is just, I think it would really help to be able to talk about things, especially at the early stages of development, when we can sort of look at how things are working. Plus, it will strengthen us. Anyway, just tell me when I can talk about it. Okay, so before we go into the nuts and bolts of maybe then what it would look like if we tore up the blueprint and started again, could we maybe then speak a little bit about, would a step like having Relief Society presidents take more authority for things like interviewing other men and women, I suppose, if a man would rather speak to a Relief Society president, would that be better if we recommend interviews, things like that?
I think it would be better. Can I just share something on that front, Jane? It was confirmed to me the other day by talking to a priesthood leader with a position of authority. It was confirmed to me that if a woman in the church wishes to access family services for therapeutic work or counselling, that she does not have to go and talk to her bishop, which might be a really difficult, uncomfortable thing for somebody to do, particularly if they've experienced abuse or harm or struggled to trust men. But they can have that conversation with the Relief Society president, who can agree to that person accessing family services and therapeutic work for the church. And the Relief Society president can then say to the bishop, I recommend that you agree to this, and I recommend you pay for this counselling. But the bishop doesn't need to talk to the woman or be involved in it.
And they don't always know
but
that.
I don't
You're
think,
absolutely right.
But when I was told that by a senior leader in the church, I said, well, you've got a problem. I said, because our Relief Society presidents don't know that. And I don't think our bishops know that. So we have some of these really good ideas floating around the church that could make a significant difference. But they seem to become closely guarded secrets and nobody knows about it. So nothing gets done.
Can we talk about
the fruits of it?
Yes. Okay, because this is probably my number one thing, that where we to have if this was a bishopric council, if this was a stake presidency discussion, one of my major concerns is about how insular we are. So Richard Heath, your comment about the wards here in the UK, perhaps even for great reasons, are surrounded by really high railings, fences. I mean, if you'd have to climb through a lot of barriers to see that all visitors are welcome. Even the sort of the car park gates are often open, where the sort of community pedestrian gate wouldn't be. So they're not welcome. They don't look welcome. They don't look part of the community.
No,
and to take that further, if you may be welcome to go to any ward all over the world, and people are supposed to be made to feel welcome. That's the ideal. What is going on with ward and stake and Facebook pages? I mean, you don't even get a recommend to join. It's the most bizarre thing in the world. If you wanted to go, and I mean, I was a few years ago visiting in Dundee. I had a conference to go to, an education conference, and I'm going to get to go to church because I'm going to get to take this long weekend. And I mean, you just can't find out what's happening locally. If I show up, are they all at stake conference this week? Or is it even going to, you just can't find simple information. Some of the brilliant things that are being done, like in some of the wards and stakes, in a time of financial crisis, where we've got this energy crisis and people are struggling to both eat and feed their homes, some of the churches in the UK are functioning as warm hubs. That's incredible. Why can't we talk about that?
In the UK, we're really struggling for libraries. Why can't we have a library? Why can't we have a, just like you say, a resource for people to go and use and find community throughout the week? Why do we just leave people locked out of somewhere where we're telling them they're going to find love and community? It rings hollow. Actions speak much louder than words. Gosh.
They do.
Okay, my next suggestion, do we need the youth programme to exist then if we're possibly getting rid of things? I certainly would like to maybe talk about if it's needed at all, and if so, could we merge the youth programme in our ward? Would that be doable?
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
How much more sensible would it be to have a joint young men and young women's? And actually could learn to interact with each other. They could socialise. You would not be struggling for leadership in the way we are at the moment. Membership has fallen so much that wards are struggling to staff these auxiliaries. So bring them together and have a joint presidency.
Yeah.
There's a radical thought. Let's have a joint young men, young women's presidency where they actually work together.
At some points, that one, they're really struggling for youth leaders. Two, there is an imbalance of power there, and an imbalance of use of resources as well, where often the young men are more favoured from a economic point of view as to what they can do for activity.
Yeah, they are.
And then you also get different characters. So I remember at one point there was young women doing particular activities that some of the young men really wanted to join in, and young men had organised activities that some of the young women wanted to join in on. And they weren't allowed to. And how ridiculous is that? This is youth night. This is the time to bring along your non-member friends and make yourself build those friendship groups. And we're keeping people separate. And not only that, but boys want to hang out with girls and girls want to hang out with boys, and they're teenagers. Yeah. Let them. Do we want them to meet and marry in the church, or do we not?
Right. Many, many years ago, a long time ago, when I was called to serve as young women's president, and the bishop talked to me about, and I sat there and I looked at him and I said, do you know what? I said, I'd rather be young men's president. And he was quite horrified and quite like, oh, you can't say that. I said, no. I said, tell you what, I said, I'd much rather be young men's president. And he sort of asked me what I was talking about. And I said, well, they have much better activities. I said, they have more money spent on their activities. They do more exciting things. They have way more fun. I said, I'd much prefer that. I said, I'd fit in far better there than I would in young women's. But he was having none of it. And he's like, go away, be a good woman and serve as young women's president. But,
I would like to see the gendered aspect.
How I saw the difference in the programs as an adult woman.
Yeah. The gendered aspect of church for me is certainly problematic, and yet it's also incredibly important for a lot of people to be able to access. I really gain a lot of strength in sacred female spaces that are inclusive, trans women. If male, if a man wanted to sort of join that class, but not, the way sometimes sort of like a Bishopric member will sit in and you've sort of got the authority figure up the back, that's horrible. But if someone wanted to sort of gain strength in that space, I think that's something we should be able to talk about. What are some of the things Victoria sort of points out? This isn't necessarily about male or female. The same demographic of people tend to be called. Just changing the gender isn't necessarily going to change the problems. So were we to be in this position where we can look at, so what are the problems we're facing and how could we creatively with this, if we need to talk about change in doctrine, let's have a conversation about it, because certainly there's things that we could bounce to, up the chain to who is it ultimately ends up with the first president.
If a bishop rang me on the sly and said, Ruth, I need to pick your brains, give me 10 things now that I can change, I've got them. I've got a list as long as my arm of things that they could change. And without even changing what they currently do, because, they want to keep it as it is. But there's loads of stuff that they could change. I don't think bishops should sit on the stand. I think they should sit with their family.
Yes.
I don't think that bishops should be
Yes.
going to the chapel to have meetings when they can send an email. I don't think they should be interviewing people at all, unless that person has said, Bishop, I really would like to talk to you about something that's bothering me. I'd really like to pick your brains on something. Absolutely fine. That makes sense. I don't think we definitely don't need to pay tithes anymore. That can be done away with. And that's not to say that people aren't being charitable and giving, but let's steer them to giving their time and their energy to actually helping outside of the church. Working and serving inside the church is not service in my mind. It's being part of a club, and you're just facilitating that, in the same way that if your children play in a football club, you might be the person that takes home the kit and washes it. You're not doing service, you're just facilitating a hobby of yours. So let's do service where we actually help our communities and go out there and as a strength and a body of people with a mindset of wanting to do good in the world. Wouldn't that be powerful? But I also think there's so much they could do as far as the auxiliaries. I think they should, certainly in the UK, scrap them and let's wait until we're up to strength before we institute auxiliaries, because people are on their knees and can't cope. They just need maybe a sacrament meeting, maybe to sing some hymns and feel that community. But they don't need to then have the stress and pressure of trying to fill all of those callings. Bishops' families and bishoprics' families make huge sacrifices to support that one guy sitting in that role and sitting on that stand, often at the expense of mental health, family relationships, all of those things. That's a huge price to pay when we could share the load a lot more fairly and equally. But yeah, I think things like, let's get some high door sort of handles on rooms in chapels that children are going to be in. Let's keep people safe. Let's have designated toilets for children, designated toilets for adults, and keep people safe. And let's not make the disabled toilet the women's room to go to feed a baby. That's just
breastfeeding.
Yeah, I'm not breastfeeding in
I think also
disabled loo.
Yeah. Oh, I spent many. I stopped breastfeeding in the toilets after a while. I thought, I'm breastfeeding where I happen to be sitting, and that's what's happening.
Yeah.
But do you know, when you're saying about all the things that could change, we learned a lot of lessons during COVID, didn't we? Yeah. About home Zoom church connected a lot of people together. I have had, just this last week, I've had 2 or 3 people mention and say to me that because of various health needs, age, health problems, they really struggled to get to church, and they loved COVID because they could join in with sacrament meeting and they could join in with meetings online. And now churches have stopped Zoom. They're back to not being able to join in, and they're missing it and they're craving it and they wish they could do that. So why can we not have some kind of mix and match? Hey, we're going to Zoom these meetings, these lessons, we're going to Zoom this church service so that everybody can join into it. And let's find out what would help people join in.
Yeah. And let me take that further. Can we stop panicking about who would be watching these Zoom meetings, or, if it's broadcast over YouTube? What is the big work? Because, we're talking about, Facebook pages and we're buildings there, but it equally extends to if someone wants to watch a stake conference. Oh my goodness, trying to get that information is like trying to get, I don't know, it's so inaccessible, and there should be no reason for it, right?
No. If we're zooming a sacrament meeting and we love what is being said, what is being done, how sacrament meeting is happening, if we hold to the principle that this is God leading and directing this and we're doing God's work in it, then why should that be hidden away from people being able to watch it on Zoom? It would connect people. It would bring people together. It would expand the reach of the gospel, not shrink it.
Yeah.
So what do we want? What do we want our ward then? Again, imagining ourselves in this decision making position. What are the needs in a ward then? What is it we would like our ward to be strengthened in? What is it we want to address? Sara, we were speaking last night and you had mentioned courage as being something that you felt that would be really important in a ward if we could learn and embrace the idea of courage. Do you want to speak about maybe why you were thinking that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we struggle with at church is we don't have the courage to say what we're really thinking and feeling, and we don't have the courage to do something new. We don't risk new things each day. We don't risk our loss of status, our loss of popularity, our loss of relationships. We're not prepared to risk them by actually saying what we really think and what we really feel and what we really mean. And I think it would be, can you imagine how different Relief Society or Sunday School would be, or sacrament talks would be, if we really spoke with a position of courage of what we actually really are thinking and feeling and believing, and things that we think would assist and uplift and encourage other people. I think if we just took courage as being something to be different, to just stand our ground and be different, I think we would see, I think it would expand things again.
Yeah, and do you know, it's about taking ownership. Also, when we mess it up, I mean, I know that Richard Heath made this great comment for our podcast listeners. Would we really want to broadcast fast and testimony meeting to the whole world? I mean, yes,
Well,
absolutely.
I mean,
Let's own
I think
all
we should.
the quirky the things I've said at times in testimony meetings makes me want to shudder. But that's part of the reason why we started this podcast too, because I am going to own what I say. You know, I'd use the example, I think I've shared it on the show. I've shared things about my personal experience that it's hurt some people in my ward. I wouldn't say it again if I had the choice to repeat it, but I own that I did. It was truthful, it was honest, but it had consequences. And that's really, really rubbish. But to be able to sort of take away that, you know, sort of to really courageously own what we say, without fear that someone's actually going to say, you know what, you've got. And by the way, I don't even think it's anything to do with the quirkiness of how crazy Mormon we can be during testimony meetings. I think it's in case we say something that is doctrinally incorrect or embarrassing somehow to the church. And I mean, it's that's what I would love to see, is being able to get away with. Do we actually, because it's really important to the church, do we have to be that unified in the doctrine? Is there room for us to all believe different things?
But you know, the thing is, we do anyway. We do. And we spend, and I can't do the mental maths now at this time of night, but we spend the rest of our week, all of those hours, being Mormons, living as Mormons, walking the streets as Mormons, and being a billboard for what a Mormon looks like to the rest of the world. And the church doesn't edit that and follow us around saying, oh, what she just said then, that doesn't fall on the church. Of course, it all reflects on the church, because everyone that we come into contact with knows, you know, we're a Mormon, and that's their experience of a Mormon. So what we would say in a fast and testimony meeting or in a classroom or whatever, it kind of, the fact that the church would be so concerned about that being available on YouTube or the internet, really they're missing the bigger point, which is that the rest of the time, 99% of our week is spent living out in the real world and being an example of being a Mormon, and what comes out of our mouth and on our actions are demonstrating that. So I really don't think they need to worry about that. And I actually think, I love that you said courage, Sara, but I think it's courage and vulnerability are two sides of the same coin here, aren't they? Which is feeling comfortable enough to sit in vulnerability, feeling courageous enough to sit in vulnerability. And the fact that we have all kind of sat here and said, and the people in the comments have said that they wouldn't feel that way at church, tells us that it doesn't have the right culture there at the moment, and probably hasn't done for an awfully long time, because it's not feeding people. It's very surface level. It isn't actually digging into the things that people want. It's not nourishing those roots, is it? And when people leave, they've gone unnourished for so very long.
Sarah,
Yeah.
you're going to say?
I think we've got a real problem at church. Yeah, I think we've got a problem that we don't afford, allow and encourage people's individual voices at church. We've got like a set script that we kind of follow on a Sunday. I was in Sunday school last week and it was a really good, fabulous Sunday school teacher, really good lesson. But somebody made the point about how good it was to all be sitting in the room and knowing everybody had exactly the same beliefs, no matter where you went in the world, in the church, you'd be with people who believed exactly the same. And I thought, I didn't say anything because I choose my moments when I want to say something and when I don't. But I sat there and I thought, actually, even in this room, you've got people that don't believe the same things. I know people that are in this room that don't believe what I believe about certain things. And, there isn't a consensus of that we all believe exactly the same things because we're human and we develop and we reflect and we grow, and different things and different ideas and different beliefs grow and develop with us. And yet the church have this kind of banner running across the top of the church that says we all believe exactly the same, and that doesn't give room for individual voices, which is where you would bring in the vulnerability to open up discussions for people to become meaningful, to become relevant. Because the big problem the church has got today, which is why the church is dwindling massively, is the church is not relevant to people's lives today.
Yeah.
And if we want to make the church relevant, we need courage and vulnerability.
Let me speak for a second just to our sister Phoenix, our sister or non-binary mister, whoever you are, Phoenix. This experience that you're talking about is so prevalent, and I've been in a privileged position. I think, as three women in the UK, we've ended up being the people in our ward, the same as you have. If you've started to sort of speak up about things and it doesn't always go down well, if you have the social capital to do it, it goes down a lot better. But yeah, eventually you become that person. But at the end of the day, and this comes under the banner of our safeguarding campaign too, bullying at church is bloody unacceptable. Now, we do have this issue of what we're going to do about it. Do you punish people by telling them to write out the name of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints 385 times?
That is certainly a new time of punishment.
That was a circle of hell punishment, that one.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? But what we can do, and this is what I feel really strongly about, is we teach our kids this stuff. If you see this kind of behavior happening, we're supposed to stand together. We're not supposed to enable it or put our heads down or, we need to sort these things out separately. Worst case scenario is going to go to the bishop's office, and then, he has a word with everyone, and it just bubbles under the surface. No. You do not get to enter into the church building and behave like a bully and a little bitch. Let me just call you out. Now, they're in every single ward, and you are not bloody on, and you do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Shame on you. So people like you, Phoenix, people, like us, the people who have experienced these things, what we do is we go find our own online communities and we experience sisterhood in ways that serve our needs and that uplift us. And sometimes that journey takes us away from the church, because what the hell is there to go back for if we cannot find Christ because we're finding her or him or whoever he is. Sunday school becomes a contest in who can say the most wise, inspiring thing, and then correct the person next to him for getting it all wrong because you got the most knowledge. When did this become a bloody knowledge competition of what you've learned or the latest book you've studied? And so I think, Ruth, you'd mentioned earlier on, about it being sort of Christ-like. One of the things that we've seen just yesterday is the temple announcement, where it's been added to the handbook of instructions. Things are changing in the temple, and suddenly, after a long time of people not being able to see Jesus in the temple, like unless it's moving a picture, where they're not able to connect with Jesus. And I thought there would be a lot more Jesus here, and it just doesn't really seem to be, and having to creatively look for the symbolism, but we don't necessarily have the language or the skills to unlock what that could look like unless someone tells you, which generally doesn't happen. suddenly Jesus is back in the temple again, and the temple seems to, with these changes, be centering in a more visual way and direct way in Jesus Christ. I guess that's what we want from our wards. So one of the things that I would add to what we want our ward to look like, what we want our church to look like, would be the idea for me of radical acceptance. That we are not here to change people, that we are not here. If Jesus does that work in them, awesome. But that we can see things as they are. And it's really hard to accept things as they are. I was speaking with Sara a while ago about this, but we have I had this very, very concrete idea with my son Ronan. He's now 24, and when he was round about, it would have been 14. Long story, but my husband, who's not a member, was okay with the idea of Grand Theft Auto being played in our house. I was not. And my 14-year-old special needs son was accessing GTA because his older brother had it, and I was not all right. So, of course, Mormon boundaries, and and I really feel like it's the right thing to do. GTA is a terrible, horrible, it's awful.
It is. It is.
And yeah, and so I that was my decision, and it led to a 3.5 week long breakdown because I didn't understand that what was going on with my son is that he was in a world where all he was doing was driving a car around, going to an ATM machine, going to have a game of bowling. The interactions were safe, were predictable, nothing challenging was going to happen for him, and he was sort of in this really safe world that I had just ripped out his hand, and I'm telling him how bad it was. Yeah, God bless GTA in this particular circumstance. I still hate you, but I have a great love of the job that it's done in this child's life. Now, if I'm constantly looking to not understand that, when I got the understanding of what was happening in his head and what is the need that was fulfilling, what was causing the distress, how can I possibly help or understand or grow with someone if I am so determined that things must look like this?
Yeah.
Similarly with my role in caring for him, when I radically accepted, and it's a process, it's not a one-off thing, that this is what my life looks like and it's not going to change. It gives me the space then to say, well, actually, everything changes, and this means that I have a choice. I am choosing, because I could actually leave. I could choose to engage in the world in a different way. There's a whole load of options out there that I'm actually choosing right now. And I can breathe. And when people don't have choices, that's awful. It's mentally the very, very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
If we could apply radical acceptance to, rather than
it would be
bad the world is, all of these things we need to fix.
So exciting. It'd be so exciting. It'd be so exciting, because what we'd be doing is actually emulating how the Saviour in the scriptures, how we see Christ being Christ-like, which is all of the people that he went to be with, he was judged by his contemporaries, the religious leaders, and said, you're not in the right place, you shouldn't be with that sort of person, you shouldn't be doing it that way, you should be doing it a different way. And he pushed against that time and time and time and time again. That would be the sort of, if we were looking for a community that emulated Christ, that would be the sort of characteristics that we should see, that radical acceptance and fierce determination to try and help and carve out,
what we need to really remember with radical acceptance, we need to stop putting conditions on accepting people. We need, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment, about the conditions we put on acceptance of people. Christ was arrested and crucified by people because he stood up for the marginalized, the rejected, the hated, the despised, the weak, the oppressed, the poor, because Christ stood shoulder to shoulder with them, and he stood up and he defended them and he protected them and he spoke out for them and he healed them.
Yeah.
He was arrested and crucified. He gave his life for those very people because he angered the religious leaders so much by upsetting the social norms, by throwing culture out the window and saying, do you know what, we don't do this sexism in my life. I'm going to talk to the woman at the well and I'm going to love her and I'm going to encourage her. That woman you've brought to me in adultery, I'm going to show her love and compassion and I'm going to work with her. We don't like it when people do that in real life. It's like we talk about Christ doing it, but somehow when it comes down to us doing it in real life, it suddenly becomes something that's not really quite right. And I don't know how we go from Christ doing it and us wanting to emulate that and speaking of it is kind of incredible and praiseworthy and wonderful. And when we do it in real life, it becomes something else. We talk about this radical acceptance. I'm just going to use being gay as an example. That's absolutely, people say that's okay in the church. But if you get a group of sisters together talking about things and somebody kind of talking about whichever film star or church lawyer they've got the hots for or anything like that, and they start talking about that, that's okay. You rock up as a woman, you say, actually, Vicky McClure does it for me. Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
whoa.
And I think it's just that thing of we say we're accepting of all people, but then we throw around that all of this structure, which is judging people on their dress code, judging people on their hair, judging people on how many earrings they've got, judging people about what they eat and what they drink, judging people on whether they smoke or not, judging people on their their sexual appetites and who they find attractive, judging people on their educational background. We do it all. It's all implicit in Mormonism and being a Mormon. Unfortunately, culturally, that's what we do. So saying we accept everybody, but then acting like that are two really, really different things. We'd have to throw all of those things away in order to actually demonstrate to people that we want to be Christians in the same way that Christ did. It's not in the sort of the processes and the policies of the church, right now.
It's all my talk Sunday.
Fantastic! I'm really excited to hear it. And if only they were doing it on YouTube, and then I could
should all come.
Talk.
I think you should all come. Do you all want to all come to my ward on Sunday?
All want to come. Please officially ask for a YouTube link because I know that people will pitch up to watch that.
To watch
Absolutely.
it.
Sarah's speaking.
I will ask.
You never know.
Yeah, seriously, it would be fantastic. Okay, so
on a positive, so much change has happened over a short space of time already in the church, more so than I ever thought I would see. 10 years ago, if you'd asked me, where would we be with all of these different issues that we're starting to see change on, including what's going on in the temple, I would have been flabbergasted. Whether they want to admit it or not, that change has come because of conversations that are tough conversations and people expressing how uncomfortable they feel and unhappy they feel and disenchanted they feel and stuff. So,
I think there's a really true point there, Ruth, that all the really important big changes that we see in the church have actually, although we don't believe it happens, have come from the bottom down. People have actually said, you know what, this has to change. And people have kind of talked and pushed and stuff like that. And, it does start to influence how things go.
Yeah. They don't like to admit that's the case, but
well, just tell me what people wear to church.
They just don't want to admit they're listening.
But, years and years ago, you couldn't have gone to church as a woman wearing trousers in this country because it would have been so frowned upon. It would be, you can't go to church like that. I go to church. I don't go to church every Sunday. I'll probably go every few weeks. But when I do go to church, I always wear my black jeans because I'm comfortable, I'm relaxed, I'm happy in them, and I feel okay because I'm not putting a face on, I'm not being somebody different, I'm being who I am, and what I wear is black jeans to church. Nobody bats an eyelid. But years ago, years ago, there would have been, and when I first started wearing trousers to church, people kind of looked a bit and like, and a couple of people said to me, "You're not supposed to wear trousers." I did have a couple of that to me.
Oh,
We're losing you. Yeah, we're losing you again a little bit, Sarah. Yeah. So basically, I think from what Sarah's pointing out is sort of addressing, exactly what Victoria's saying, and change does come from the top down. Absolutely, we are definitely bound by what leaders are saying. I think what's really exciting about this time is that we've been able to sort of demonstrate that, Sarah's example there of wearing trousers, it's become more common because people have started doing it, whether it's from an act of rebellion or to stand with to stand for priesthood ordination. It just sort of became normalized. Other women saw it happening, and they started to, because it was normal to wear them. I tend to, just for a whole host of different reasons, I tend to do the same thing, and we're certainly seeing from the campaign that we've been doing, that these are grassroots campaigns that we're encouraging members and leaders to talk about. Another great example, Nemo the Mormon, when he's contacting his stake president and things aren't being resolved, and as things are sort of moving up the chain, we can see that actually there are processes that are at play here that we've just never really seen happen before. Up until this point, I think we've seen, if your stake president or if your bishop says, well, this is the way it is, and you're going to have to deal with that, they are the ultimate authority. That's really, the concerns stop there. But suddenly we're at a moment when actually we can hear what everyone else is saying. We're in the chat, everyone's in the same place, that we can actively say, well, hold on a minute. My stake president's supposed to do what with this information? Oh, okay, it goes from here. And so we're able to sort of see things modeled, I think, that we haven't been able to see yet. Maybe that's why the idea of, having this discussion about authority not necessarily looking all male, why I find it really exciting, because it does mean that, do we just totally tear up the handbook and start again?
Yeah.
So maybe that's my question now. Well, what do we want to keep? What things are working? Is there anything?
I think there is. I think the fact that we three sisters, are sitting having this conversation this evening with people around the world, communicating as well, means that there is community there, that there is a tie that binds us, and a shared experience that binds us, that wherever we are on the spectrum of Mormonism, we feel that community there, and that is powerful. So do we want to keep that? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's hang on to those, I think, and keep that conversation open.
I think the church does, when the church does community well, the church does community better than anywhere else. The church can do community really, really well, and that's something to hold on to. I think opportunities to develop talents and skills can actually often be found at church. I think there's some really good opportunities, some space to develop, to grow.
I think that's one of my favorite things.
Friendships for our kids.
Well, certainly that there's been periods of time when that's worked really well. The ability to encourage people to publicly share their knowledge and to be sort of supported in leadership roles. Those things are good. Community, I kind of struggle with it, because I think it's often seems to be more of a community in theory than in action. And I know there have been times when it has worked very, very well, but it's certainly not been unique to the church. And it's borne out by people who, when they leave the church, often are finding a more supportive, loving, Christ-like community, by not affiliating with any other faith, or finding it in more sort of secular ways, or by going to other faiths, where they just sort of see something more in line with what meets their spiritual or emotional or physical needs. So I feel a little bit on the fence about it. It should be front and center of what keeps us together. I think something else I would probably, one of the most valuable things I think is the idea behind it, that sort of, we were talking about this right back at the start, that actually you have the authority to pray to God, and that you have the authority to have revelation, communication from on high about your life, that you are of worth. Those it's such a paradox to me that we preach worth, and yet so many people feel unworthy. And I think there's a bit of a disconnect there, but the essence behind it of your individual worth, I think, is incredible. Do you think there's anything else worth keeping? What about the sort of ministry of other members? So traditionally home and visit and teaching, is there a place for it?
I personally wouldn't, only because, and I spoke about this last week, I personally really dislike the assignment of friendship, because it can be pulled away as quickly as it's given, and what it does is stop people feeling actually connected to other people. I absolutely think we should encourage people to build proper friendships, but I don't think you need to be assigned a friend. You need to model how to be a friend, and people will do that. People will just find that connection if you give them opportunity to build proper deep friendships, as we have done across, do you know what I mean, across place and time across the UK. We have found a way to build friendship. You guys weren't assigned to me, I wasn't assigned, and I think ministering was done with the right intentions, but it actually creates the opposite effect, which is people don't trust their ministering brothers, sisters, because they know they can change on a dime. And if I overshare with this person, then, next week they're going to be in a different calling, and next week they're going to be in a different calling. And I don't want to unpack with this person who's going to be pulled away from me. I want somebody who's actually my friend.
So do we need a church without
I like the theory of string. Sorry,
yeah.
Jane?
So what does that look like? I'm just sort of making the point. Do we need a church without walls, where it looks like ministry in the community?
Yes, we do.
Yeah,
I think we need a church without walls. I think
I want to go sit in a field somewhere and have a picnic with people, and actually play a game of rounders. And the Americans won't know what rounders is. Play a game of rounders and just have an absolute fun time, and build that sense of community. And if we want to start and end with a prayer, fine. That's
it's so funny, because we mentioned Alana, our girl who's with us here in spirit. I remember we had participated in a joint service with the Community of Christ. We're leading it, and as part of that service, there was some meditative breath work. It maybe lasted for sort of not even as long as 10 minutes. It was maybe about 5 minutes long, and knowing how many challenges Alana has faced, and some of the challenges that she can have around stillness, working through the traumas that she's experienced. And I remember sitting next to her, sort of thinking, look at how she's connecting, because she's being led through this as an act of spiritual worship. If she had had those experiences as part of her worship growing up, sort of giving her the tools to breathe and be still, to accept, to be vulnerable, to feel love, how different would my friend's life be right now? And it just, that question really blew me away. So I feel like I want to keep the ritual, or some ritual. Maybe maybe keeping temples as a way to do that, where people who want to engage in a specific sort of ritual type way would be really good. Although I do appreciate that I probably triggered most of our audience, because the temple is not a happy place for so many people. Which I suppose is a conversation for another day about how we process the temple. That's something that we can definitely come back to. Sarah, looks like you've got
I think I would want to keep, I would want to keep some of the opportunities for discussions that we have in Relief Society or Sunday school, but the opportunity to have discussions. But I would want us to be able to all feel that we could be a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more honest, and it was more of a discussion around social topics and things that are important to us than having to be rooted in a conference talk or this particular scripture. But let's just have a talk about actually what is happening around our local community, around kind of problems, difficulties, poverty, war, injustice, and how are some of those things impacting on us as women and as mothers and as people, and just kind of have some of those discussions. So I'd like to keep the structure that enables those discussions to take place, but I'd want us each to take some more, and me more than anyone, because I don't let myself be that vulnerable at church because it doesn't feel a place where I can be vulnerable. But I would like to shift towards that place where we could be vulnerable and honest and open and know that it was safe to be that way. So I'd like to keep that.
Do you remember when we tried?
I'd like to keep.
Sorry, Sarah, please keep going.
Yeah, no. I was going to say, and I would like to keep the structure of people kind of wanting to serve and reach out to one another when we're in difficulty, because you do know that if you've just broken both your ankles and you can't cook dinner for your family, you do know somebody's going to come and help out.
Yeah,
we do know that, and I'd like to keep some of that.
When we had tried doing, do you remember whenever Priesthood and Relief Society were doing circle time for, that, was it a year? Did it go as long as 2 years? And it was sort of very hit and miss. I think in general people loved the idea, but the discussion topics, which were supposed to be, I think, agreed on really by those present. I think it was supposed to there's supposed to be a bit more interaction about that, which ended up really being about the same things we hear about every week, service, how to, just how to be a better Relief Society sister, how to be a better wife and mother, all of those types of things that we normally get to hear. And the problem that I was seeing was if there was any contradiction or any, just people who didn't necessarily view things the same way, there was just no room for that. The discomfort of that was just too much. And I think it was an opportunity for people to get more comfortable. So we have to sort of go through those processes. But in general, I think a successful lesson was felt like, for it to be a successful lesson, everybody more or less had to agree. Yes, these are some of the things that we do if we're going to be honouring the Sabbath or whatever it is. Something that really, really got me, and so many years ago, so I was managing a food bank many years ago, and one of the things that I'd heard fed back to me by someone who used the service was that the worst day for people who are in poverty, who are homeless or in food crisis, the worst day for them is Sunday, because everywhere's shut. Because all of the people who run these organizations go to church. That's the day the churches are open, and they're too busy worshipping God to feed people who are hungry. And that, for me, I think was the moment when I sort of realized we could potentially stop talking our way to heaven.
Let's stop talking about it and let's go and be Christian.
Yeah, and let's do it. 100%. Do you know what I'd like to sum up? Do you know what I could sum up the change that I'd like to see in the church?
Please, let's go to these closing ideas then, Sarah.
4 words to sum up everything I would like to see change in the church and about the church. I would like to see the church become a place where the strong empower the weak.
Beautiful.
And if we could have a church where the strong empower the weak, it will speak to our hearts around safeguarding our most vulnerable people, but it will speak to our hearts about love and community as well. If the strong could empower the weak, what would we see? What would we see in our church if that was the absolute focus? That should be the theme for 2023 for the church. And what would we see if that was the church theme for 2023?
I love it. What about you, Ruth? What are you thinking?
I think I'd be very comfortable to get behind any organisation that was led by the needs of the community rather than a top-down prescriptive approach. But I really, really, really feel that when we consider what those needs might be, it's got to be through the lens of everybody there. It can't be through a particular viewpoint. It can't be through just a male viewpoint, just a female viewpoint, just a white viewpoint. It has to go through everybody, because if it doesn't meet people's needs, we're just carrying on with the same thing of prescribing to people what their life should look like. And lives are messy and complicated. Families are messy and complicated. We need to meet everyone's needs in a really unjudgmental way.
You know, it might be the case that wherever people have landed in this journey who maybe haven't approached Mormonism yet at all, or who have experienced it and not like how it's tasted, I think there has to be grace given to, you know, people. If you feel like the whole religion needs to burn down and it's not a positive force in the earth, your experiences must be honoured. I absolutely stand with you. If the church has caused pain and you feel it continues to do so, I'm with you. I know it hurts.
We ride at dawn.
Yeah,
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I've got the matches. We ride.
Yeah, we need to do better. But I also, I guess, would say that the value that the reason I still feel so empowered and excited by this subject, the reason we do a podcast, the reason even church history, I think, is just blooming fascinating, is because we do have these really creative, amazing people that I made a covenant to love. I swore I would do that, and I'm going to continue to do that, who have got pain and vulnerability and needs and anger and joy, and I see that they are changing the landscape, certainly for me. And I believe that the church is becoming a better place because everyone's having these conversations. So I think having space to be able to talk honestly about how we're feeling. Can we have atheist Mormons? Can we have people who just reject the whole thing? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'll sit with you, right? It's could those
should
people
be okay?
Yeah, could worthiness interviews, would you be able to go to the temple if you don't believe in God? I mean, like we there's so many good, exciting conversations to be had about it. But if ultimately you don't show up and you don't feel welcome, I think that's where maybe the ministry that we're looking at that is purely patriarchal, I think it misses it. I think one of the many strengths of Jesus Christ was that he was in many ways both the divine feminine and the divine masculine in this one person. So and you don't even have to embrace that. I love the potential, and I will keep coming back to that, I guess. I don't know. Maybe nothing will change, but my experience, it always does. So we'll see. We've got people who are definitely right now making things better, whether the church will ultimately go with that or not. Okay, this has been fascinating. I have really enjoyed the comments. You guys there, that has been so good. If you want to continue the chat over on any of our social media pages or reach out to us at all, you can just pop us a message. We really love to hear from you guys. Let us know how you're getting on with what you're experiencing around safeguarding. We're still asking if you're in the UK, and if you don't even have to personally experience it. If you know of anyone, if you've witnessed any victim experiences, something that you would term as abusive, we're trying to gather stats on prevalence. So we would love to hear from you if there's anything that you think you could contribute. Sarah, you were going to say something?
Jane. Yeah, can I just add to what you just said there about please reach out to us? Yes, we are continuing to be contacted by many people who've had abuse experiences, or their family or people try and provide some ministry and support for for you incredible people that have contacted us. Likewise, if any of you know of a risky situation that is happening in the church that you don't believe the church have got under control, and you're really concerned about a particular person that poses a risk, and you know they're in a church community, if you drop us a line, we will try to make sure that the right people know about that, to make sure that that risk is managed. And that's not to say let's go out on a witch hunt. That is absolutely not to say that. It's just to say, if you know a specific person in a specific ward and you have spoken to the bishop and you are still worried it's not being taken seriously, then we will pass that high up the chain and make sure that it's listened to.
Yeah. Absolutely. And remember that everything that you speak to us about is confidential. But yeah, whatever you'd like to share, if there's something that you need us to talk about, if there's something that's on your mind, please do reach out. Again, we would just thank you for all of your donations. We love and appreciate you, especially at a time when things aren't so good financially out there. The fact that you see value in our work, we are putting your money to really good use. So thank you for that. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, we hope to see you next week. With a little bit of luck, we will be able to share a link for Sara's talk. If not, we're going to make sure that you get to hear it. I think the next couple of weeks we're
message my
planning.
bishop now. I'm
Do it.
going to suggest it.
Let's all stay on the line and see if he messages straight back with a link. Right? Just do you want to call
I don't think
him?
I have that.
Sarah, call him. Phone him.
This is about Sara.
I'm not phoning him live. I'm not phoning him live on podcast. That's not kind.
The good thing about Sara is you know that talk will be well prepared, will be written down ahead of time, edited, thought through, carefully planned. She won't be winging it, or she won't do it from a couple of cue cards. So
I won't be winging it. I won't be winging it. And actually, having told you all on the podcast some of the stuff I'm talking about, I might not be talking at all now on Sunday anyway, might I? He might be messaging me as I speak to say, don't bother.
We've changed our mind. Well, we haven't changed our mind. We're going to make sure that you get to hear Sara's talk one way or the other, even if she needs to do it just for you guys. We will make sure. But we're hoping in the next couple of weeks to talk about a little bit about Emma Smith. There's some things that we want to explore about Emma's journey. And we have got lots more to tell you. So yeah, like and subscribe. We will see you if in the chat across some of the, I think Mormonism Live tonight is going to be an exceptionally good episode. Don't forget to say hey. We will be there with you. So good night, everyone, and we'll see you all next week. As always, we bless your journeys.
The message is going. Good night, everyone.
Good night.